In a world where truth is a few clicks away, how does a former US president, with access to the CIA, FBI, NSA, and every global intelligence tool known to man, still peddle myths and delusions about white genocide in South Africa? Let's be clear, Donald Trump isn't ignorant. He's strategic. This isn't a mistake, it's propaganda. While South Africans fight real battles against inequality, crime, and corruption, Trump hijacks their story to feed a fantasy, a white victimhood narrative for his base. He paints a picture of genocide, a racial war, not because it's true, but because it sells fear, and fear wins elections. But here's the problem. When you have unlimited resources to verify the truth, and still choose the lie, you're not just misinformed. You're malicious. This isn't just about South Africa. This is about America, because when the so-called leader of the free world spreads foreign disinformation knowingly, it signals something deeper, the end of American moral authority. The mask has slipped, the empire is cracking. This video is not just a debunk, it's a warning. We're not just witnessing a lie about South Africa, we're witnessing the final act of American global credibility, and the world is watching.
You would have seen a video played in the Oval Office in a meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa and his delegation from South Africa, who met with our US counterpart, President Donald Trump. The video shown by the White House emphasized a lot of things, including statements made by EFF leader or Commander-in-Chief Julius Malema, as well as former President Jacob Zuma. But the one thing that President Trump touched on was a video that was taken from the sky in a helicopter, and it showed a road and crosses on either side of this road as hundreds, if not thousands, of vehicles lined this road.
Those people were all killed.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No, I'd like to know where that is.
Now, that video was taken in September 2020. It was taken on a rural road in the Normandie area, which is in northern KwaZulu-Natal, in an area known as Newcastle. And that video was taken in response to a murder that was committed earlier that week. On August 30th, 2020, Glenn and Vida Rafferty, a progressive couple in the Normandie area, were murdered at their farm. They were killed along with their dog as intruders entered their home and ransacked their place and stole a number of items and goods before fleeing in Glenn's vehicle. The vehicle was found later abandoned, and 2 years later, subsequently, 3 people were arrested and charged with the murder as well as robbery with aggravating circumstances and sentenced respectively. But that specific protest you saw in the video, right, was a multiracial protest. According to the Institute for Race Relations, who were there on the day of the protest took place the following weekend on September the 5th, the Saturday. And this was in response to people trying to make government aware of the plight of farmers in the country and trying to raise awareness around farm murders. Now, Glenn and Vida were murdered on August 30th on the Sunday. On Wednesday, September 2nd, the former Minister for Police, Becky Cele, together with Fani Masimola, met with the Rafferty family in Normandie. I was there. I was a reporter in KwaZulu-Natal at the time. I attended that meeting that Cele had with the family, as well as an open engagement and dialogue that he had with farmers as well as farm workers in the community. So there was a response from South Africa and the government to that specific incident. Cele saying at the time that there had been about 7 murders within that area in probably a year. And of those 7 murders, they had made basically arrests in every case. So there was attention being given to it.
You only see negative things about farm murders and politicians and everything else on TV. And this is an experience I don't wish on anybody, but our experience has been very positive. The police have been amazing. It's just nice to know that the senseless murder of our friends is being taken seriously.
There's claims that each cross on either side of the road represent people who were murdered in farm attacks. That's not the case. The organizers, who the Institute for Race Relations spoke to at the time, said they were merely just trying to raise awareness. And those crosses were just trying to raise attention as to the plight of farm workers and the dangerous conditions they live in. But our crime stats clearly show that there's no white genocide happening in South Africa, and specifically targeting farmers. Last year, in the third quarter of 2024, 12 farm murders were committed in South Africa, and these were farm workers as well. Of those 12, and bearing in mind that 7,000 people were murdered in the third quarter of 2024, only one was a farm owner. The rest were farm workers, the rest were people who lived on small holdings and rural areas that can be considered as farm holdings. It must also be noted that President Donald Trump held up a number of articles claiming to show white genocide happening in South Africa. Some of these articles weren't even from South African media or reputable media houses in South Africa. One article we looked at was published from the DRC. It didn't have anything to do with South Africa. South Africa's got a crime problem. We don't have a farm murder problem. And that's the truth. For Eyewitness News, I'm Arun Singh.
But just going to our very first slide, which speaks to this particular issue, by Minister Senzo Umchunu, these stats were released recently, and it looks at farm murder rates in South Africa. Murder in general was down by 9.8%, rape cases down by 3.3%, and that speaks directly to what the COSATU president, Zingiswa Losi, raised in her input to say that in villages where people have got the same skin color like you and I, our mothers, our grandmothers, they have their throats slit, they are killed, they are raped by people with the same skin color like you and I. And this does not speak to a genocide against a particular race.
So there's a national crime, violent crime problem, not targeted on the basis of race.
There is a national violent crime crisis in the country that was spoken about by John Steenhuisen, the Minister of Agriculture, that was spoken about by Johan Rupert, that was also admitted on a global platform by the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. South Africa is ranked as one of the most unsafest countries in the world. And then there are sexually attempted offenses as well that were down by 3.2%. So this paints a picture generally of a general crime problem within the country. Tembegile, moving on to our second particular slide. This looks at farm-related murders. Out of the 6,953 reported killings nationwide, 12 happened on farms. Out of the 6,953 reported killings nationwide, 12 happened to be on farms. So these are the statistics that the president did not have on hand. But if he did and present these stats to Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America, that would have drawn a protracted debate between the two, that would have diverted the entire attention of trying to speak about the trade relations between the two countries. Only one of the victims was a farmer.
Right.
Out of those 12 farm killings, only one of them was a farmer. The remaining 11 included 5 farm workers, you know the skin color of those farm workers, 4 farm dwellers, 4 farm employees, 1 security guard, and there was one whose role was not specified at all. So there is no genocide that is taking place in the country. Even international broadcasters were out to prove Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, presented misinformation to the South African president, and even the person who took the pictures and planned those particular symbols of graves on the highway in the country said that those were not graves of farmers that were murdered. That was symbolism of killings and crime that is taking place within the farms in the country. So essentially, the whole charade of yesterday at the Oval, the White House, proves that misinformation is on the rise. And if statistics such as these that we've presented from the South African Police Service are not presented to the international platforms, it will further perpetuate this lie that is peddled by AfriForum and others, whom, by the way, in the words of the ANC Secretary General, even influential people like Gary Player, they speak ill of their own country to the United States of America's President, Donald Trump.
Briefly then, Samgele, before I let you go, After what we witnessed in the Oval Office yesterday, is there an understanding, a sense that this will finally be put to bed and will deal strictly with the facts between Washington and Pretoria?
The truth of the matter is that there is no bridging of this particular matter. There's no way of convincing the American president on this particular issue. But what we do know is that there are many victims whom were black workers or residents that have been accused in some areas and are said to be Afrikaner farm owners. But the police minister, in the stats that were released on the 21st of February, has urged it that it's a more nuanced understanding and interventions that are needed to deal with this particular issue. But there is no genocide currently taking place within the country.
Explain and verify with Samgela Maseko. Samgela, always good to see you. Thank you very much.
An update now on the only refugees the Trump administration has allowed into the United States since taking office. They are from Africa, but they are not from Sudan, where fighting between warring factions has killed an estimated 150,000 people and displaced more than 11 million people. One faction there has, according to the U.S., committed genocide, but Sudanese have not been welcomed as refugees by the Trump administration, nor has anyone from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there are well-documented numerous cases of sexual violence against women amidst fighting between the government and a militia called M23 in eastern Congo. Refugees from the DRC are not welcome here. As far as we can tell, no black Africans have been given refugee status since President Trump's inauguration day, when he signed an executive order effectively shutting down the refugee program. But on Monday, the first group of white Africans were welcomed here. This is them. They are Afrikaners, descendants of Dutch and other settlers to South Africa. Afrikaners created the racist apartheid regime that brutally suppressed and controlled the black population in South Africa until 1994, when black South Africans were allowed finally to vote for the very first time. The president was asked why he chose to give special treatment to Afrikaners of all people.
Because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. It's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place. And farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me. But white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa.
Well, keep it honest, there is not a genocide of white farmers in South Africa. That's just not true. That idea has been debunked by a number of organizations, both inside and outside the country. Here's what is true. Crime is a huge issue there. The country has more than 20,000 homicides a year. An Afrikaner group that counts farm attacks recorded 49 farm homicides in 2023. And experts say both white and black farmers are targeted. Now, I'm not naive. I know a white landowner in South Africa, someone I admired, who was murdered years ago. It was a crime. It was not genocide, though. As far as farmland being confiscated, last year South Africa passed a law which allows the government to seize land without payment in some cases and redistribute it if it's found to be, in their words, just and equitable and in the public interest. Supporters say it was an attempt to right the wrongs of apartheid, which saw land confiscated from blacks by Afrikaners. 30 years after apartheid, black South Africans are over 80% of the population, but still own only 4% of private land. Now, whatever you might think of that law, and good people can disagree, the South African government says they haven't actually seized anyone's land, at least not yet. The bottom line is the president saying it's a genocide is not true, and they're getting fast-track status to America because of it, over the millions of people across the globe facing political or religious persecution or any number of other circumstances which would qualify them for refugee status. Now, the Refugee Resettlement Agency, run by the Episcopal Church here in the U.S., which has been helping refugees coming here for nearly 40 years, they are now refusing to participate in the resettlement of these Afrikaners. In a letter explaining the decision, Presiding Bishop Sean Rowe, who I'll speak to in a moment, wrote this, quote, "In light of our church's steadfast commitment to racial justice and reconciliation and our historic ties with the Anglican Church of South Africa, we are not able to take this step." He went on to say in his letter, "It has been painful to watch one group of refugees selected in a highly unusual manner receive preferential treatment over many others who have been waiting in refugee camps or dangerous conditions for years." In reaction to the church's decision, Vice President Vance posted an article about it with one word: crazy.
But here's where it goes from cruel to despicable. While cutting off food aid to Sudanese families living through an actual genocide, You're fast-tracking white South Africans for refugee status under a manufactured claim that they are the victims of genocide. You tried to block the admission of individuals who had already been approved to come here as refugees while making bogus claims to justify granting such status to Afrikaners. You've made a mockery of our country's refugee process, turning it into a system of global apartheid where political ideology and race, more than truth or need, matter.
You know, dealing with the Americans is a challenge because if you disagree with the Americans, life becomes difficult in dealing with anybody. No one wants to touch you, which is a fundamental problem. In 1 year, when they wanted us to not to buy oil from Iran, which we have never bought since then, we then said, okay, can we get a quota? They then said, okay, you can get the quota. We agreed to go and get this quota. Do you know? No one would ship it. No one would insure it. So the significance of that is not only between us and the American, is the implications for market sentiment across the globe for South Africa.
The first country which we approached in the 60s for assistance when our leaders had to leave the country in order to mobilize the support of the international community. The first country we approached was the United States of America. We could not even succeed to come close to the government, and they refused to assist us. But Cuba, the moment we appealed for assistance, they were ready to do so, and they did so. Why would we now listen to the Western world when they say we should have nothing to do with Cuba? It's just unreasonable. No human being acts in that particular fashion. Here is a country that was the first to assist us when the West, which had formidable resources, was actually supporting the government. Now you expect us to change our whole approach and to start condemning Cuba for what is supposed to happen inside the country. No man of principles could have done that. And that is what I try to convey to Coppel.